Chip Kelly has lost more than twice as many games at UCLA in 2 seasons than he lost at Oregon. Let that sink in. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Bruins. We got Tony Siracusa on the line from Last Word on College Football. Tony, I know you hate to hear that, but I'm spitting out the facts as we do here on my channel.
Oh, hey, look, there's a reason you're the voice of college football, okay? There is nothing but truth in that. It's been 2 abysmal seasons in the Chip Kelly era at UCLA.
46-7 at Oregon, 7-17 at UCLA with a 4-8 to 1-game improvement last year. Let's start with the defense because that is getting quite the attention despite a defensive coordinator who's still intact, but coaching changes, schematic changes, and hopefully results changes after finishing number 111 in the country in total defense last year.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is going to be everything, as you pointed out, Mark. I mean, they've been horrible the last 2 years, near the bottom in the entire country under Jerry Azzanaro. And, you know, there was a lot of wait and see with Azzanaro during the offseason, taking a look at what could or might happen with him because his contract expired in February. Now, those of us who know Chip well enough know that he is exceedingly loyal. He was never, ever going to fire Azzanaro. There was some thought that Azzanaro could step up into a more administrative role or do something himself to open up some other opportunities for some other coaches to come in and make some changes. None of that happened. Azzanaro in February signed a new 1-year contract. The strange thing about that contract, too, before we get into the details of the defense, is that UCLA brought in some new assistant coaches. They had some openings. They brought in some new assistants. Those guys got 2-year deals. Any coach whose contract had expired other than Azzanaro got a new 2-year deal. Azzanaro is the only coach who only got a 1-year deal. Now, Chip Kelly wanted to argue that point with the media on Thursday at practice, saying that there were other coaches who only had 1 year. Yeah, but those are coaches who are on the second year of a 2-year contract. They only have 1 year left. Any new coach or any coach who got a new contract got 2 years except Azzanaro. So they brought in Johnny Nansen to coach the defensive line. He comes over from USC. He spent about 6 years there before being replaced when Todd Orlando became the new defensive coordinator. And they brought in Brian Norwood as the new defensive backs coach from the Naval Academy. Interesting thing during the offseason on Norwood's Twitter profile, it listed him at UCLA as the co-defensive coordinator for about 48 hours. And then it got people's attention and it was taken down. It could have just been a mistake, but you generally don't expect sloppiness from people who have, you know, lived, breathed, eaten, and coached at a military academy for the last few years. So it's almost like there was something there, like perhaps his role is going to be more significant than just defensive backs coach, but not entitled. You know, perhaps that's got to wait until they deal with another year of Azzanaro. The biggest change that we've seen so far 1 week into spring camp is that the Bruins are not in a 3-4 defense like they were last year. And the year before under Azzanaro. They're playing more of a 4-2-5. They're back to 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. I think that if you're UCLA, you've got to look at anything, you know, to make some changes. Part of the reason is they lost 8 linebackers last year, either to graduation, departure to the NFL, or grad transfers. So they don't have a lot of depth. They only have 3 guys who really have taken any significant snaps at all. And, you know, they're going to be relying on youth. They're going to have to bring in a guy like Bo Calvert, who sat out most of last year with an NCAA suspension, played in 2 games, and he's going to be one of the lead linebackers now, just out of necessity. So I think part of that change is to cover for the lack of bodies at linebacker. You've got more depth at the defensive line. You've got plenty of depth in the defensive backfield. But the other part of it is you got to shake things up. The defense has been horrendous the past 2 years, and you got to shake things up.
And it seems as though, to me, based on the way football's played now and with the proliferation of the passing game, that the scheme is awfully important, but the designation of players on the three levels of defensive line, linebacker, and secondary isn't as important as it once was. The distinction between linebacker and safety isn't necessarily what it was. Linebackers are leaner, faster than they used to be, less traditional in that box of the three behind the four linemen versus having to play more of a hybrid safety, and the safeties support the run. And I just think that there's something to be made there. Everybody's got to play. Anybody in the back 7 or 8 has to play in space against the passing game. There's no question about that. And again, UCLA at number 111 in total defense last year. But the big improvement that could come with this team is just the sheer numbers that are on the field. As I look at it, I've heard that the first 2 years under Chip Kelly, we're talking in the low 60s in regards to the number of players actually on the spring practice field, and they hit the field with 99 in day one.
Yeah, and we're calling it 90 plus. They lost a player already after 1 day of spring camp. Backup quarterback Austin Burton hit the transfer portal. A couple players with some minor injuries, but you're right, Mark. That's critical. 90 plus. You and I have gone over this for 2 years now with Chip Kelly, where he constantly goes on about the youth, the inexperience, the young players. These guys are just learning our system. All of that for the last 2 years, which last year we greatly debunked. But beyond that, the point being, you're getting a lot of guys now. They still are in the low numbers. They're still below 85 when it comes to scholarship players. They've got a lot of walk-ons out there. They also have some early enrollees from the December and February signing dates. But they're getting a lot of snaps for a lot of players that otherwise didn't happen the last 2 years. So clearly, being inexperienced and youthfulness and all of those things that Chip has talked about is not going to be an excuse or not going to be the case come August when fall camp starts. They've got a boatload of players at pretty much every position. It's just now getting them the snaps over these spring camp weeks.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Bruins. We've got Tony Siracusa on the line from Last Word on College Football, so we invite you on over there to check out his work, as well as a number of other folks that join us on a regular basis, including Kevin McGuffey. We got a breakdown from Kevin here recently on Kentucky, so check that out. Offense and defense, and Jason Ray's lined up here pretty soon to talk some Oklahoma football with us as well. So the folks at Last Word on College Football always have treated us well. Talking offense, Joshua Kelly. I don't know if that was interchangeable at one point, but I believe it's officially Joshua Kelly. Had one of the great stretch drives that we've seen for a running back in recent times in 2018, coming down the stretch, just barreling teams for 200 plus week after week after week and making a name for himself. He battled some injuries last year, still gained 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. He's gone. Demetric Felton's an interesting player, and then he's kind of a jack of all trades. I just read some information on him in regards to what he thinks about his season. He dipped his toe into the NFL draft waters just to see what his evaluation would be. Made a wise decision to come back. Caught 55 passes last year, but he runs the ball as well. Britain Brown comes in from Duke. Won't be on the field until August, but he gained 700 yards for Duke and 7 touchdowns rushing a few years back before injuries kind of hit him. So let's start on the offense, and however you want to break this one down, Tony.
Yeah, I think, look, there is no glossing over the loss of Joshua Kelly. I mean, he was your workhorse. He was your go-to guy. He was the guy who could easily manage 30 carries a game and get his 100-plus yards. And, as we had talked about, was a guy who could take the pounding every game. And there is no replacing that. And I think that UCLA is going to be very much running game by committee. One of the things that happened last year with Joshua's early season injuries were that, as you saw, we saw, or as you said, we saw a lot of Demetric Felton. And Felton came in as a wide receiver. And Felton last year played some running back, moved into the slot, played some receiver, but played a lot at running back. I think because of the depth of the running back right now, you're going to see him moved around quite a bit, at least through the first few practices at spring. That's what we've seen, is that he's going a little bit of everywhere. So I think that the offense is in terms of a running game, even in terms of a passing game out of the slot position, is going to revolve around Felton. But they do have the transfer from Duke. They've got Casimir Allen. They've got some guys who can carry the ball. They don't have that 30 carry per game kind of guy, at least no one who has yet proven that they can do that. So I think you're going to see a lot of running back by committee, running game by committee, and try and move the ball quickly, try and move the ball faster than what they have the first 2 years.
Running back, wide receiver, important positions. Don't want to discount that, but it seems as though the elite teams and the very good teams in each conference have the guy that obviously runs the show at quarterback, has the ball in his hands that can do the job, and an offensive line that allows the fast, speedy guys in space that just about everybody has to do their work. Dorian Thompson-Robinson came into his UCLA career with a lot of fanfare. Put together a decent season last year at 60%, 21 touchdowns, 12 picks, ran for 4 touchdowns. You mentioned Austin Burton's transfer. He had the Oregon State start, hit 27 of 41 in that game, so they don't have him, but they do have a lot of depth behind Thompson Robinson, it appears. But is there a quarterback battle ensuing, or is it DTR and that's it?
No, it's DTR's job. Chip told us that, every position is open and there's a battle at every spot. And that's what every coach says in spring camp, because that's what you're supposed to say. It is DTR's job. There is, with the loss of Burton, they have no backup who has taken a snap in a college game. So there is some work to be done with the backups. DTR has proven, both the 2 years he's played, that he's gotten banged up and he's missed some games due to some injuries. And so you've got to have somebody ready to go. You're looking probably right now, the guy who's getting the second snaps, the number 2 snaps, is Colson Yankoff, the transfer from Washington. He'll be a redshirt sophomore, good-sized kid, big arm strength, and he's looked good so far in the few practices at spring camp. He is right now, I would say, the number 2, but it is DTR's show to run. He's got some weapons. They've got most of their receivers back. Theo Howard, of course, did the grad transfer to Oklahoma, and then his season ended when he tore his Achilles in off-season workouts. But Logan Loya, the freshman from St. John Bosco, who was a highly valued recruit, is an early enrollee, and he's looked really good so far as a receiver, working out with working with DTR and the first team. And you've got Chase Cota coming back, and of course, as we talked about, Felton as well. So they've got lots of weapons, but DTR's got to improve his game also. Even in spring, we're still seeing some of the DTR flaws that we have seen previously. His propensity that when he's in trouble, he scrambles backwards instead of going out wide or throwing the ball away. He's still trying to make a play happen, still trying to keep it alive too frequently, and when the odds are too stacked against him. And so there's still some things he needs to work on, but it is going to be his offense to run. They've got some holes to fill in the offensive line. Of course, losing center Boss Tagaloa was huge. He was the center for the last 2 years, literally and figuratively, that offensive line. And then Chris Murray, the guard who had played every game in his first 2 seasons at UCLA, decided to transfer out during the offseason. So they definitely have some holes to fill on the offensive line. You're looking at John Gaines, who is getting a lot of snaps at center. You're looking at Jake Burton will be back, and Sean Ryan and Duke Clemens are back. You're also looking at Sam Marazzo, who is getting a lot of snaps at center. So between he and Gaines, one of them is going to be the center. The other will likely move to guard to fill in those 2 spots. You don't have a lot of depth at offensive line. Again, for UCLA, it seems to be a recurring theme, not just in the Chip Kelly era, but going back even to Jim Moore. There's just not a lot of depth at offensive line, but there is enough talent there to protect DTR.
Looking at the 2020 schedule, 3 non-conference games that are very winnable with no Power 5 opponents, New Mexico State, Hawaii, and San Diego State, the latter 2 on the road for UCLA. Not give me certainly against the Hawaii or San Diego State, but again, not necessarily the 4-touchdown type deficit point spread that they faced against Oklahoma the last 2 years. But a lot of work to do before that, of course, here in the spring and in August. Tony Siragusa from Last Word on College Football. Please check him out and the rest of the staff right there. Like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe right here at Mark Rogers TV. Tony, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Always glad to do it, Mark.